in the new issue of the New York Times Magazine's The Lives They Lived issue. Magazine's editor-in-chief, Jake Silverstein, joins us now. Jake, we were talking about this in the commercial break. It seems every year when we look back at these moments, we think of how much we are losing, how much we have lost as a society, both politically and culturally. Right. This year, no exception, losing a lot of heavyweights in both arenas.
And no better place to start than Aretha, the Queen of Soul. She's one of those people who, at the time of her death, her influence and her sort of cultural pervasiveness was so great that she had definitely already attained a kind of mythical status. And so then when they pass, you think, wow, you know, this person has actually left their human form and become a myth. I mean, it's easy to forget now because there's so many big voices in American pop music, but it's hard to remember that she was really just like a freight train hitting American pop music with that voice when she broke onto the scene. And, you know, it's great at the time of a death, somebody like that, to be able to go back and listen. If viewers haven't gone back at the time of her death and listened to some of those early
We are
songs,
fortunate enough to have her music with us, you know, always to stay with us.
I think there are probably so many artists out there that say Aretha Franklin inspired them in one way, shape, or form. She's that type of person in the industry. Talk about Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade, both dying so tragically of suicide, I believe. Really just a week
very close,
apart. I feel like their deaths are really going to have a lasting impression, especially on the younger generation and the conversation surrounding suicide as well.
There were a lot of suicides this year. The two of them, I mean, less well known, but I think in certain communities just as important. Mac Miller, the rapper who died, he was I think 24 years old, overdosed on fentanyl. But Spade and Bourdain, those were the two most viewed obituaries at nytimes.com this year. They really just captured people's imagination, and I think you're right. I think that helped drive a conversation about suicide. Another suicide on our list was Margot Kidder, who's famous for playing Lois Lane in Superman, just an indelible character in a lot of people's memories, and what a wonderful actress. And something that I think a lot of people didn't know about Kidder is that she suffered profoundly from depression and mental illness throughout her life, and was an alcoholic and tried to deal with it in a lot of ways, and eventually drank herself to death, died on Mother's Day this year. And it was reported after her death that it had been a suicide. A really moving story in our magazine about that.
As is with so many of these that we were just talking about, their deaths often spark a national conversation of sorts. Let's talk a little bit about some of the political figures and political icons we've lost this year. Senator John McCain, the Bushes, President Bush 41, and the late Barbara Bush. Their absence, what does that mean for our national discourse in politics and the lives they lived?
Well, the Bushes, of course, both Barbara and George H.W., they just loomed so large. And McCain, too. I mean, McCain even more, perhaps, because he was still active at the time of his death. I think it takes a lot of time to assess what it means for them to depart the stage. You know, and we had a little bit of that at the time of their deaths in the memories. I think people talked a lot, of course, at the time of Bush's death about the decline of civility in American politics and how he was such a symbol of that, an earlier era, et cetera. We actually chose to focus in terms of our stories in the magazine on slightly less well-known figures, and so somebody that comes to mind from politics is Dick Tuck, the prankster who was essentially like devoted himself to following around Richard Nixon during his campaigns and his presidency and trying to disrupt him and disrupt his rallies and disrupt his speeches and pretty much do anything he could.
What did he do in order to do that?
He would just, I mean, it's a long story. There's lots of great details in the magazine, but you know, he would follow him around and kind of, you know, hold up protest signs, hire people to hold up protest signs at his rallies that were sort of coded special messages that would really get under his skin. And Nixon was particularly susceptible to being annoyed by that sort of thing. He was very focused on order and control, and so he was irked to no end by Dick Tuck.
What was so different, you think, this year compared to years past about the losses that we've experienced on the public stage? You
know, I mean, it's interesting. We do this issue every year, and it's a little bit random because we reach out to writers who we love and say, who died this year who you have some sort of special feeling for. And so it's not like we pick absolutely the most famous people, because those people tend to be covered at the times of their deaths. So many of those died this year, Burt Reynolds and the Bushes and so forth, Stan Lee. But we like to reach out to writers and ask for people who are going to be unique and whose stories our readers maybe haven't heard. And so you get, you know, people who are semi-famous, like Dwight Clark. He was a wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers, so my team growing up. And he's immortalized in this famous catch called The Catch. It's in every sports bar in the Bay Area, hanging on the wall. And it's a 1982 NFC Championship game, and he's in the back corner of the end zone, fourth quarter, catching a ball that won the game against the Dallas Cowboys. And he just had an interesting life. He was something I didn't know until we did this. He was claustrophobic, and so every time he ended up at the bottom of a pile in a tackle, it was just a terrible experience for him. That catch, Montana to Clark, is just a famous moment that he was part of. We have some really interesting philosophers and scientists in the magazine.
Right.
Yeah, a remarkable list. In fact, when you look at it and see all these remarkable people and the impact that they've had on our culture and our society.
And I love that you did choose to cover lesser-known individuals so we can learn more about their lives.
So much.
Yeah.
Jake Silverstein, thank you so much.
By the way, New York Times Magazine, The Lives They Lived issue is out and available online right now. Jake Silverstein, thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.